Welcome. Yet again, it's time for lockdown hobby time. Day 23, and we've got this beast out, the Hellfane. Plenty more work to be done on it, of course. And not only that, also got the crew here, just itching to be worked on as well. What else have we got? We may end up doing something more on this guy, possibly today, but the Hellfane is going to be the focus. This is looking pretty sweet though. Pink and tentacly goodness going on there. We've already got Dwarven Darkness in the chat. Hello there. And anyone who's watching this, don't forget to like the video, obviously. And prepare yourselves, prepare your mind, body, and soul for a cleansing of sorts. A cleansing of the ills and the misery, the drudgery of lockdown. And allow yourself to be washed over with the joy of unbridled painting goodness. I think that's a good enough intro. So last night, off camera, I got these two dudes up to basically the same paint level now. So they're both pretty damn close to being finished, if not finished. So this guy was obviously nowhere near done yesterday. But let's see, where's it going to focus on him? What's the optimum focus range? There you go. So he's got green oozing out of his mouth as well. He's got lovely green eyes also. And they're looking not very friendly, but they're looking the way that they're supposed to. Angry, mean. I don't know who ties this guy's hair back. Certainly not his twin, since neither of them have arms, unless they're just really skilled with their teeth at doing that kind of thing. So they're off to the side for the moment. Still no plans for the bases for those in stone. I've got a few ideas. But Hellfane, that's going to be the main piece of work today. We've got Steve in the chat as well. Hello there. Opening the wet palette again, and it's still in very good condition. Still plenty of paints looking nice and moist in there. There's one thing we like around here, it's plenty of moisture. So, what are we going to do first? Well, I've got Glorious Gold here, which is the same colour that was airbrushed onto this, and there are a few parts I need to touch up with the gold. There's these little armour plates on the legs, which you can't really see very well because it's not very strong, the gold airbrushing down there, so I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go around the edges of any parts that I may have corrupted with the black when I was filling that in. And then I'm going to have one final go over and see if I've missed any black spots as well, anywhere that should be black and isn't. And then after that, we're going to get the silver out, I think, and apply some silver to possibly some areas on the big back armour plate, or whatever this is. Maybe it's more ceremonial, this bit here. But these parts of the plate, I think, are going to be in silver, and depending how far we get along with that, I may do some of the parts that I know are going to be in another colour as well, which could be a brassy or a bronzy type colour. So some of these pipes, maybe, some of these chimneys. And that should see us through to the end of the session. It's quite a beastly bit of work to be done there. We might even get time to do some skin on the crew as well. And if we do that, then we would possibly move on to the Reekland Flesh Shade, which has applied over the skin and all the gold. So you can look forward to that. We've got Graham in the chat as well. So, let's unload some of this gold onto the wet palette, shall we? Give it a good shake. And on to the palette with it. And which brush do we want? We don't want too fine a brush, but not too fat a brush either, so let's go for this one. I'm using this brush a lot lately. Let's start off with these big, juicy armour plates on the legs that didn't get quite enough attention with the airbrush. It might take more than one coat of this, but we'll see how it looks after the first one. I'm not just going to pile up the paint thickly just to avoid doing a second coat. That would be a bad idea. So he's got these little armour plates on all of the shin areas. I'm not sure how useful that really is, considering the whole thing is just a big solid ball of rock. I need to tilt it to some pretty bizarre angles to get right in between the legs to get to the juicy centre. It'd be much easier to just turn this thing upside down and paint it that way, but there's this handle that I've got on it as well. That would get in the way of such a technique. I don't want to be scratching paint off the model by gripping it unnecessarily by its tender regions. I think that'll do for that one. And onto this one here. What's everybody else working on today? Anything exciting on this lovely Sunday? To just confirm that it was Sunday in these strange times. Whatever you would normally use to track the days of the week may have been thrown off. Whether that's work or regular sporting events. I think this one is going to need a second coat. It would have been an option to go in here with a brown first before the gold. But I thought, you know what, there's a bit of gold on there already from the airbrush. It's not too dark, maybe I can get away with just one coat. And the other one actually looks okay, but this one is looking very dark, so we might need to add a second coat on this one. Which is fine, because we've got the wet palette, so we don't even need to pour the paint out again, assuming I don't use up all this that's on there. Almost done with this one as well, for now. For the inevitable second coat later. Steve finished painting 2 troops of sculpt outriders, now making a couple of heroes on gauze. And chopping up the harpy we traded, ah yes. And Graham found an old model last night. Body and legs were there, but no sign of the feet. How does that happen? Was considering sculpting new feet and claws this afternoon in the back room, doing an odd job that I have been putting. ... Yeah, old models were usually attached to their feet. And then he's just found the feet. Isn't that wonderful news? Got one more shin plate after this, and then it's time to go back and make sure all the black is done. So I'm going to do the rock parts before the gold, because the rock will involve a fair amount of dry brushing, which can of course corrupt the surrounding colours. The gold will have no dry brushing on it whatsoever. It's all strategic precision highlighting. And the other front one. These ones are much easier to get to. I'm very much looking forward to this guy being finished, because I think it's going to look very cool, just based on looking at everybody else's completed Hellfanes and how impressive they are. And I think with my colour scheme, it's going to look pretty damn good. I've noticed that most people posting up pictures of their finished Hellfane, they've left gaps on it. And I'll show you where when I've finished with this armour plate. People obviously not as picky as I am when it comes to perfection and gap filling. Okay, so let me just rinse this brush down, and I'll tell you exactly where people have been leaving gaps. So, here is the front of the Hellfane. this piece here, this bit of the front fence surrounding the platform, at the edges, it doesn't quite meet up correctly there on either side, unless you maybe bend it in some bizarre way, in which case it probably wouldn't touch other things like this at the front or the base of the platform underneath. So I green stuffed up, if you were watching the videos where I was constructing this model, you'll have seen I green stuffed up the gap down here and down here, but every other Hellfane that I've seen so far has just left a big juicy gap on either side. And also, the other gap is here, at the top of the head, connecting the head to this plate. You can probably just see a little bit of uneven texture where I green stuffed in there, down in this crevice here. But all the others I've seen have also left a gap there. So other people just aren't bothered about these things, seemingly. Maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist when it comes to crevices. Okay, before that needs a second coat, let's go over and fix any areas that I may have applied too much. I've just spotted one thing I don't like, actually. This armor plate here, at the bottom of it, there's a couple of bumpy areas. And I don't know whether that was caused in the spray painting process or what, but I am going to actually get those off with a knife right now. Which means I'm going to have to go and fix it, but I'd rather do it now than when the model's completely finished. But there's a couple of rough spots that I just don't like, and they have to go. Obviously I have to paint over them. And here. I want it to be nice and flat. Now I'm not sure whether I'll need more primer on just these tiny little spots, but I'm definitely considering it. If something's not right and you keep leaving it and it becomes more obvious as the model continues, if you're me at least, eventually I'll just go nuts and have to remove it and then end up repainting a huge part of the model, when I could just fix it now when it's only a small amount of hassle to repair. So this is definitely the best option, I think. Okay, so I'm going to paint some primer back onto those areas now. We've got Raphael in the chat. Hello there. So let's get the primer out. I don't think we've got any primer that's still wet on here. Maybe that is actually. Let's find out. Not really. So just a little splodge. Okay, this has actually not come out very well. I think I didn't shake it up first. So let's give it a good shake this time, which is obviously the correct protocol with this stuff. This is Vallejo Game Color Glorious Gold so far. There will be other golds involved at some point. Just fixing a mistake at the moment. Not so much a mistake, just something that was missed rather than misplaced brush strokes, for example. Better to fix it as early in the painting as possible to reduce the repair work required later on. It does look golden. That's kind of the idea. So, doing some more gold repairs now. There's going to be more gold repairs required later, because when I get onto the dry brushing on the stone, some of that is going to obviously get onto the gold. Obviously, when you're at the very edges between two colours like this, if you kind of keep on top of it so that it's only a small task each time, because if you leave yourself with a lot to do every time you're fixing it, then I think laziness might set in and more mistakes will occur. And you end up having to correct it in both directions multiple times. So I'm just trying to keep on top of it. I'm not going to paint the pipe there because I'm going to do that in a different colour shortly. I was having another look at the official Mantic paint job, the Hellfane, and realised that the way the lava's done on that is not going to look anything like mine. So it doesn't really matter that I'm not going to be able to paint it as nicely as that one. It's going to look totally different. Where would you put orange? Because right now it's mostly gold and obsidian. There's going to be very little orange at all on this thing, if any. My golems don't have any orange on them. I'll probably do some orange on the crew's cloaks or fabric. Not sure if they're all cloaks. But this actual beast itself, I'm not foreseeing any orange on it right now. I don't think anyone looking at my army would describe it as an orange Abyssal Dwarf army. It's very much a black and gold Abyssal Dwarf army, with some orange featured. My goblin army is definitely orange. That's the #1 colour there. But this army, definitely not. Let's do the second coat on these armour plates that required it now. This one doesn't need too much attention, I think. This one at the back here. Or next to it definitely needs some work. So what's everyone doing to pass the time during these difficult weeks? Is everyone just getting their painting out the way? Spotted a little bit that shouldn't be attached to a spike here. Don't know if it's going to be a problem, but it's going to be removed anyway. It's not big, it's just a tiny little bit of excess. Not sure what it is. I'm not sure it was actually part of the cast or whether it was something, just a little grain of something that found itself stuck there. But now it's gone. I know some people are still able to get plenty of gaming in during this time, depending who their opponents are, typically. And whether they live together, for instance. That would make it much easier. Life hasn't changed for Steve much as he's still working. Yeah, plenty of essential workers still out there, or people who are just still able to work for other reasons. Spotted a bit of rock that I've missed actually around the buttock region. So I'm going to be fixing that in a moment. Just washing off the brush with the gold on it here. A bit of soap. So this Hellfane is going to be quite a lengthy project, I think. There's a lot to do on it. It's quite a gargantuan beastie. So while I've got that black out, I put some of that primer out a minute ago. I could apply some of that into crevices that I'd previously missed. So let's find the perfect brush for that. This one will do. A nice big fat brush. Whatever black I use here, it doesn't matter whether it's shiny or matte, because there's going to be matte varnish over it at the end. And before that, actually, there's going to be Nuln oil over it before it's finished. So that would also take the shine off. So I think I mentioned this yesterday, but I am arranging my first over the internet webcam based game of Kings of War, which will be made into a battle report. And that should take place this week. And assuming it all goes smoothly and there aren't any issues, then I'll start doing more of those regularly. Obviously only with my armies. But I think I've got enough that most people out there will be familiar with at least one of the armies that I play. Are you playing Rem? No. At least not for the first game, but I could certainly show him some sweet Kings of War action over the internet. He could be next. I'll have to ask him. Okay, I'm going to pour out some more regular black paint now. We don't need to use primer for this when there's none. When there's some just sitting there, I might as well use it, but now that there isn't, back to the regular old black paint. Okay, there's not much left to fix on this bad boy. After I fix the black, I'm going to do the flesh on the crew. And then we might be able to start thinking about the next steps on this guy. Very exciting times ahead. With my rock painting technique and even my gold painting technique, it comes together pretty quickly once you get into it. Hopefully I'll be able to see good progress over the next few days. I know a couple of people have been commenting they wanted me to be working on this first because they're just so obsessed with this model. But I've got a lot of things on the table at the moment. And this is definitely taking centre stage right now. But I'm sure I will mix it up with other things as well, just to keep things interesting. It depends, because if I get into a real groove with it, then I might not want to put it down. That usually happens when you reach that magic point in the miniature, when it seems like there's not much left to do. It looks like you could put it out on the table, and then something tells you, no, I can't just leave it like that. I have to keep working on it and get it absolutely finished now, because it's so close to being done. And some models look like that after just a couple of base coats, depending what colour scheme you're going with and which techniques you're using to paint it. And others, it doesn't really come together until really close to the end. And those are more difficult to get motivated for, because it always looks like it's so far off. Currently picking out little bits of rock that no one will ever be able to see. Unless you hold the model upside down and hold it from a very specific angle. And that's not going to happen. Every time I turn it in a different direction, I'm spotting new little tiny bits of either grey or gold that I missed. It's just finding the right balance between fixing all of those and realising when to stop, because it's so wrinkly that no one's ever going to be able to see into some of these crevices. No one would be able to hold the miniature like this when it's finished. So you have to know when to stop sometime. Spotted another little bit just as the black paint's run out. So I'll need to splodge out a little bit more. Speaking of Rem, by the way, there is going to be some more live Vermintide action tonight, which is going to be at about 10 PM. So if you're interested in rat slaying, that is the place to be. Okay, I think I'm coming to the stage where it's pretty much all covered. So all the gold bits are gold, all the black bits are black, and that's how it's supposed to be. There will be repairs later on when areas get corrupted by dry brushing and washes and so on, but for now that's going to be fine. You know what? I'm outraged. There's only one like on this video so far. That feels like a knife to the back. There should be at least 3 by now. Oh, there's 2. And 3. Okay, I'm happy now. That's fine. You can stop liking the video now. So, while he's drying off, let's put him to one side, and let's get out the crew and do their faces. Because the faces will be done before the Reclan flesh shade is applied, since that's also going over the flesh and the gold. So we might as well do them together. Just soaping off this brush here. Violently. So the faces are very, very small on these guys, obviously. And there's lots of armour surrounding them, so I think we may actually need the fine detail brush for this. Let's have a look. Yeah, probably. I don't think they have any other visible skin though, just the faces. They're certainly wearing gloves. I think they're wearing gloves. Definitely looks like it. But before I confirm, I am going to look at the official Mantic website, just to see if their models are wearing gloves. Let's see. Yes, they are. They're all wearing black gloves on the Mantic official paint job. Okay then. Let's do the faces. And the colour I'm going to be using is Dwarf Flesh. And yes, this is a very old pot of paint. Look at the shape. Very old indeed. Let's give it a good shake. And obviously it's old, so it's not the thinnest paint out there. So we're going to put it onto the wet palette with a different brush, because I don't want to use the fine detail brush for such crude activities. So let's splodge out some of that. Over here. And a bit of water in there as well. I would imagine that this brush, or this paint should I say, is probably older than some people who may watch this video. I don't know if any of the people watching live are that young. Oh, we've got Stu in the chat as well. Yeah, there are 2 regular Stews in the audience, aren't there? We've got Mr. Stu Gibson and Mr. Stu Rat. I know which name I'd rather have, to be honest, assuming that Rat is his real name. And I have no reason to believe it isn't. Although it could be argued that the name Rat, its credibility was boosted by the professional football player Razvan Rat. I assume at least one person who is younger than that paint will watch this video by the time it's finished its life cycle. Painting up the face. Not doing the beard yet, because that's going to be black. Obviously, like all the beards in this army. I always feel that the black beards illustrate exactly how evil they are. Nothing says evil like dark facial hair. Stu is apparently the same age as me, which I believe is about right. So we're definitely also older than that paint. I'm sure there are youngsters out there in the community though. Okay, there, another face down, and just this guy to go. I wonder if I own any miniatures that are older than me. Possibly, because a few years ago someone did send me some old classic dwarves, and I'm not sure exactly what year most of them are from. When did Games Workshop start producing, or Games Workshop or Marauder start producing metal dwarves? Okay, face is done, so off they go for the moment, and then they're going to be Reekland flesh shaded as their next step over the gold and the face. Steve says they were Citadel miniatures first. Well, I know I've got an old dwarf wizard or sorcerer, and a few others from around the same time period, but I don't know exactly which year they would have been released. I don't know where they are right now. They're in here somewhere. So let's put this fine detail brush away for the moment. And while waiting for all those paints to dry, let's ask the audience for some feedback on these guys. So I could very well call them completely finished right now, and then just varnish them, and then work on the bases. Would that be acceptable, or do you think they need something more? They've both got green ooze coming out their mouth, they've both got their teeth and their eyes done. They look very, very horrifying, they've got their hair done. But the skin, it's dry brushed and textured, so there is detail there, but is it still a bit plain? Does it need more? Do I need to go in and pick out all the big bumps in a different colour, for instance? like these blobs on the neck here, on the leg. Should they be another colour, or is this enough? Is this a paint scheme that is fine and should just be continued across the whole army in this exact style? Would that be great? Graham says GW moved to Nottingham in the very early 80s to start casting their own figures. Okay, if it's the very early 80s, then it's possible that some of the miniatures I own might be older than me then. So he says the really old stuff, late 70s, early 80s, was solid-based pre-slaughter bases and were lead. Yeah, I don't think I've got any that had the base built into the miniature. Don't think I've got any that were quite that old. I do like some of those old classic dwarf models. Just dwarves in general I always really liked back in the Warhammer days. Still got my army mostly painted in about the year 2000. Just chilling in a drawer. Of course, I did take it to a Warhammer tournament at Adepticon about, when was that, 6 years ago? And it hasn't seen much action since then. Where else have I used it in the meantime? I did take a few units down when I was doing some preview stuff for Warhammer Total War as kind of the Warhammer representative that was there, which was fun. And I took some miniatures down there, had a little game, put them out on display on a big table that was set up. I think the terrain tutor put that terrain together because he was down there as well. And what else have I done with the dwarves since then? I've probably played about 2 Kings of War games with them. But not many, because it was never really a very competitive army in that sense. Because a lot of the stuff that's really juicy in Kings of War are models that wouldn't really have been represented in the old GW line, such as cavalry and rock beasts. And of course, I've just got lots of infantry and war machines in my dwarf army. Stu has a metal dwarf that was cast in 1984. And Steve got his first miniature 40 years ago, an orc model with polearm. Very nice indeed. And I'd be interested to see what size that miniature is compared to more recent orcs. I would guess that it would be more comparable to a modern day Mantic orc than a GW one. They just seem to be constantly growing in stature. So, do we have any thoughts on these? Do they need anything more doing to them, or can they just be as they are and plonks on the base? Thoughts on that? Sue says, was that when you played someone from Creative Assembly and they brought a full cheese Dark Elf army? Yes, it was that incident. You see, I thought I'd just take a few friendly units down there because maybe they don't know what they're doing that much, these computer game folk, and I'll just take some nice units to just set up on the board and it'll look nice. And there'll be a little game of it as well, which would be fun. And then, of course, it was all the filthiest of the Dark Elf stuff that was available against my puny dwarven warriors. Graham has some Middle-earth figures from the 70s. What's the sign that you're getting old in wargaming nowadays? Is it still Napoleonics? Is it 6 mil Ancients? Those are the two stereotypical collections that someone would have if they're advancing in years, shall we say. What's it going to be in the future, though? Is it going to remain that way? Do people get into more historical stuff the older they get? So, next. That skin's got to be almost dry on these guys now. So we are actually going to do the next step on them first, I think. Which is going to be Reekland Flesh Shade, which is in my Citadel paint holder here. Steve says, yeah, a lot closer to Mantic. I've got an orc of the same type. I'll put a picture up when I get a chance. Very nice. Even before Space Marines became giant Space Marines, GW was still increasing the size of everything over time. I've got a lot of Deathwing Terminators, obviously, with my Dark Angels army. And back in the day, I also had Deathwing Terminators, but they were considerably smaller. And in fact, I've got one metal Terminator torso that's much smaller than the current crop. And do they do Primaris Space Marine Terminators yet? I haven't really been keeping up with it. And Steve likes the way the Night Stalkers look as they are. Okay, so I'm thinking I'm probably just going to leave them like that. I'll varnish them, obviously, with matte varnish. And then I need to finalise ideas for the base scheme. One idea I actually had, which I thought would be totally ridiculous, but potentially could work. Here's the idea. You've got your base for the model there. This relies on the model not overhanging the edges of the base at all. And on each side of it, you have a two-way mirror. So when you're looking in from the outside, you can see the model. But all the other surfaces, if you're looking through the front, the back and the sides will be a mirror. So you'll be able to see the reflection of the monster there, which would be quite horrifying. But that would be really difficult, and I don't even know if that's something you can easily just buy in cut-to-purpose pieces. But I thought that would be amazing. I've also had ideas like putting the models upside down, pinned to the base with their heads like they're walking on the air, or putting a see-through top on the base so they're all walking upside down, or they're walking on the side there. Just weird and nightmarish stuff, or having some of them upside down in the unit and some of them the right way up. I've got all kinds of crazy ideas. It's just what is too much. And when you're dealing with upside down models, you have to make sure that it can still be seen. Stu says, Chaos got some new embiggened Terminators that are Primaris sized. And my Deathwing is still perfectly valid. Well, that's good to know. Other ideas I've had for the bases involve embedding reflective surfaces into the base, or angling reflective surfaces down into a pit so it looks like the pit goes on forever. I don't know how I'd go about that, but I'm sure I would be able to find out. It's not that uncommon a trick in art, as far as I'm aware. I just want it to be something weird and really out there. But I'm not sure how, like, the sideways on the base look or the upside down on the base look would work. I'm not 100% sold on that, especially for just a creature on its own like this. Steve says, how about shattered glass on the base? Something like that would create some weird effects. I'm not sure if I've seen anyone use two-way mirrors on a unit before, but that's one thing that really jumped out at me as being a fascinating idea. And you could also pretend you were in a police interrogation room while you're playing, which would just be a joy. So that's something I'm pondering strongly at the moment, trying to work out what the best option is for these bases. Because I can continue painting more of the models. I'm obviously not going to have a full army yet, and those Dreadfiends are the first guys that are close to being finished. And they will be the first ones finished as soon as I can finalise the bases. A Shadow Hulk is going to be a fun thing to work on as well, and then after that, I'm probably going to paint some Butchers, because I've got enough of those to do a Horde. So I could do 5 of those on a base, or I could just do them as... I could do the full model count of 6, because they're not that big. They're smaller than a Troll, but they have the same base size, so I think I could actually fit them onto the base with the correct amount of models, so I could do them in 3s, potentially. I'll have to look at the army list to see whether that's something that's viable, or whether I would always want to run them as a Horde. And if I'm going to go for something like broken mirrors in the base, is that something where I would just embed that into Milliput, for example? Would I put them down flat? Would I have some other kind of texture going on there? Would I green stuff some faces for the base and put mirrors in the eyeballs or something? All kinds of weird, crazy ideas are going around my head. Do I have pits on the base that the miniatures are coming out of, with tentacles on the bases? Obviously, I'm running a bit low on tentacles at the moment, but I'm sure I could find a cheap source of them out there if I put the word out. That's what I'm looking for. I'm sure somebody knows where to get tentacles on the cheap. Just lots and lots of options, but no rush at the moment. So let's get Reapland flesh shading the Hellfane crew. So I'm just going to do the entire model here in this Reapland flesh shade, because a lot of it is going to end up as gold anyway. So I might as well do all of it. Even the parts that don't end up being gold, it doesn't really matter, because this isn't exactly a thick paint that's going to obscure the detail, it's just shade. And I have a feeling it's these kind of paints that end up splattering specks all over my monitor, which is right in front of where I'm painting here. So while we've got Mr. Stew here, how's your hunt for a PC going at the moment? You're still waiting for something to be in stock? And while we've got Steve here, I assume you've had a good look through the contents of the Andy Fantasy Mystery Box that you received. Is there anything in there that immediately jumped out to you as being something that you could use in one of your current army projects? Next. Steve says boils with green oozes and embedded mirrors would look really wacky. It definitely would. I think slime pits are a potential idea. But I also want to have something really out there and wacky, like something mirror related going on as well. Steve says, the big crab thing has already gone into my Trident Realm box. Yeah, that is a very nice crab model, but I just didn't have a use for it, since I kind of stopped my Chaos Space Marine army, which was crab themed, and that was what I was planning to use it for. But that's an army that's long since been abandoned, so there was no point just holding on to an unused model. It's good that it's gone to a home where it's going to find some love. Crab love. Steve says, yep, all the other components back in stock except from the tower, waiting on the email to tell me when it's available. Yeah, that's always the way. There's always one thing that holds orders up. So with this guy, I'm not 100% sure which pieces are going to be gold at the end. So it's just easier to do all of them. So on my music playlist that I've been listening to, it has a lot of game and film soundtracks on it. And it just came up with the skeleton scene music from Jason and the Argonauts. Classic. Yes, Steve, if you had a box of mantic crabs, that is a hoard. Many people have got crabs from mantic. So this just darkens up the gold, especially in the crevices. And then the next step for the gold will just be reapplying that same colour, but ignoring the crevices. The same colour being glorious gold. And then after that, the edge highlights will be, where's it gone? There we go. Polished gold. And then the corner highlights, or anything that I want to shine, is just going to be done in silver on top of that. So there's that done for now. I'm not going to apply that to the Hellfane's gold yet. But I am going to start painting some of the Hellfane in silver now. Because there's such large areas that definitely aren't going to be gold when it's finished. So I'm going to go in and fix up some of those now. So these two big areas here, think I'll do them in silver. I just have to decide what else. Now, where is the silver hiding? There we go. Waiting for a fresh bottle of silver to arrive as well. Steve says he'll be keeping at least 75% of the bits from the mystery box. Good. That's a pretty good rate, I think. But there is some pretty juicy stuff in there. Okay, a lot of silver came blobbing out of the bottle there. Let's water that down. It's lucky I've got the wet palette though, because now it's going to stay good quite a while. Okay, let's start applying some silver. Might take more than one coat, because I have just thinned it down quite a bit. Might have put too much water in it. But you get the idea. And just as I applied the paint on here, I can see a weird bit sticking up that's not supposed to be there. So I think I'm going to take that off with a knife in a second. There are so many little things that you don't see until you start painting. Just apply this colour to the back carefully. My Hellfane is going to have significantly more gold on it than most. The official Mantic Studio paint job has quite a lot of silver on there. I'm not going to have that much. Okay. I could also do those bits there in gold, I suppose. Or silver, should I say, between the gold. I think that would look quite nice. Steve always keeps a box of random models and bits to use as unit fillers and conversions. Yeah, I have a ton of random stuff. But there's always a few things that I know I'm never going to use, so might as well get rid of them. I missed the announcements at the beginning. There is going to be a Vermintide episode tonight at about 10 PM. There's of course going to be more lockdown hobby time this week, most likely every day, and the Andy and Rem show on Tuesday, which will be looking at all the latest and some of the not so latest Warhammer stuff. And also working on bringing back the Kings of War battle reports by playing games via webcam and then just taking pictures of them like normal. So this is definitely going to require a second coat, this silver. When it's fully dry, of course. But you get the idea. You can see how it's going to look when that silver's applied. Just breaking up the gold a bit there. And what else is going to be silver on this guy? I'm not even sure. I could do the platform inside in silver, these ground tiles here. But I like the vast amount of gold, I'm not even sure about that. Would they use gold for the floor tiles though? That's what I have to ask myself. The answer I'm coming up with is maybe, so I'm going to leave that as it is for now. Then I'm going to get some brass or copper. Let's see. I've got brass, copper. Which of these two colours should I apply to these pipes? Brass or copper? Copper's obviously got more redness to it. Brass clearly hasn't. So you can see the colours painted on top of the paint pots as well there. Copper, brass. Which one's it going to be? We'll let the universe decide. Put the brush down for a moment until people have made their minds up. I'm undecided. Stu's been loving these painting and Vermintide live streams. Well, hopefully people are able to take something from them. Hopefully they're able to take several things from them. The first thing is obviously something to keep people occupied and provide a bit of motivation to get things done during these times when a lot of people are sitting around with not a lot to do. Something to just chill out with and get some painting done, hopefully. Also, maybe a little bit of entertainment here and there sprinkled in, and possibly some painting tips as well. Because I am aware that my painting has improved, and there are certain techniques that people do ask me about now, like how I achieved certain looks. It's usually not an advanced technique that does it, but there are certain things that you just pick up when you've been doing it for a long time that might not occur to everybody. And I'll ask people how they painted certain things as well, and it's not always so I can use their exact technique, but it's so I've got an idea how to approach it, so that I can maybe do something simpler that would have a similar effect. If you understand how something's done, It's not just to imitate it, it's so you can understand the process behind it and maybe follow your own path that leads to a similar destination. Stu votes for copper. I suppose it is more reddy, browny, and that is kind of a colour that's part of the theme of the army. Because there's the orange in there, of course, and there's also the red, browny, orangey flesh on lots of the beasts as well. So let's try doing some copper pipes, and if they don't look very good, we can always go over them again later. So here comes the copper. Onto the wet palette in a big splodge. I hope, Stu, that you're not getting the paint dropper bottles and your baby bottle mixed up. That would be unfortunate. And when all this is over, time and opportunity permitting, obviously, we'll have to arrange another game of something at some point. I think the last one was quite a while ago. We may have had 2 games of Age of Sigmar last time, actually. So the fact that I haven't played that for quite a while should tell you that that was a while ago. I wanted to check when was the last time that I played an Age of Sigmar game. I could just go back and look for my battle reports. I can't remember exactly the last time. I did go to Warhammer World a few times over the last couple of years. Not terribly recently. I don't even know if the current rules I've got for Age of Sigmar are still valid. It's been that long since I even looked into it at all. So I think these pipes are looking pretty good. Colour seems to be working alright. And I like every unit type in the army to have something that makes it unique. So they're not all identical. So the copper on this guy is going to make him stand out a bit from the rest of the army because they don't have it. Bazooka is in the house and says, "Nice pipes." Well, hopefully it's all going to be very nice indeed when it's complete. But that's going to be quite a few days yet, I imagine. You saw how long it took me to do the grotesques. Now, it's possible that this could be a lot quicker than them, though, because the techniques I'm going to be using on the gold and the rock parts might be significantly quicker than the many stages and techniques I was using on the grotesques. Potentially. We'll find out, I suppose. This is obviously much bigger than any one grotesque, but it is just one model and not 6. Okay, those are the pipes at the back done. Steve says, have you decided on the armies for the first report yet? Yes, the first battle report, based on the person I'm playing against and which armies they are familiar with, it's going to be Abyssal Dwarves against Undead. So the first webcam battle report, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be 1,500 points. And after that, I'm going to mix up which army I use. But I want to get the grotesques on the table pretty much. That's the most important thing right now. I want them to get in on the action. I'm doing the pipes around the side here now. The slight reddishness to the copper can perhaps give an impression of a little bit of heat. Which would be nice. Still just on the base coats phase here, folks, so there's a lot to be done. Almost done with these pipes. At which point I think I'm going to dive back in there with a knife in a minute, because there's a couple of bits as I've been doing this that I've spotted that shouldn't be quite so pokey. Okay, so we're going to leave the pipes like that for now. I'll give you a good look at it all here on camera. So let's get the knife out. There are a couple of lumpy bits that need to be fixed, and then I'm going to do the second coat of silver up here. So, Mr. Knife, work your magic. Hopefully it's something that was actually embedded in the paint. That way I might not need to add any extra primer to it. But in this case it looks like it was just a bit of resin. Just a little bit too pointy. That might need priming up again. And there was also a little bump on one of these pipes. Around here. You can't really see what I'm doing because it's right in amongst the detail. But is that something I can even fix, really? Is it a problem? Yeah, I'm too much of a perfectionist. It has to go. It's like a bit of uneven texture on the top of the pipe. It looks a bit weird. It wasn't visible before I started actually painting it, though. So again, sometimes it's just that there's a little bit that's going to get stuck in the paint. Sometimes it's just the actual model itself has an imperfection that isn't really visible until you start applying the paint. And then you're looking closer while you're painting as well. And some things don't pop up until you get paint in the texture, which brings out the true depths of horrors. Mould lines showing up after you apply a wash or a dry brush is a very common one. Okay, so we're going to put, as soon as this is sufficiently smoothed down for my liking, we're going to put a bit more primer over these areas that I've just messed with. And then the paints that are going back on them again are sitting in the wet palette, so they'll be fine to apply later on. So we won't need too much wastage. Okay, Mr. Primer, tell me your secrets. There's actually a bit of primer stuck around the top of the lid, so I'm actually going to use that. Because otherwise it will just clog up in there. And this stuff does shrink as it dries, in my experience. So we're going to put off the second coat of silver. Okay, let's put the Hellfane to one side. Close the lid. And give this brush a nice soapy bath in the brush soap, which looks like that. because it's been so heavily used over the years. It has lasted me many years though, and it's helped a lot. My brush lifespans have increased dramatically, even though I'm quite rough with them because most of my brushes aren't that fine detail and many of them are very cheap, so I can get quite violent with them. This Citadel base brush used to actually be pretty good for some detail, but I've used it a lot over the years, so the point is not really there. It's a bit splayed out, so I just use it for big detail or, as it says, base coats. The one paint that's guaranteed to ruin any brush is, where is it? It's under here somewhere. Typhus corrosion, because it's like got bits of grit inside the paint. So that's responsible for what happened to this cheap brush. That's what it ends up like when you use this paint. So do not use this on anything that you care about, because look at that. But I do keep a ton of brushes. You can see. Let's bring the brush pot over for you to look at and knock over all the glue that's also in there. So there's all my brushes. Many, many, many of them. In all shapes and sizes and conditions. And it would be nice if I could actually put it back in the box, but lots of things have fallen down in the spot it was occupying, which is of course not at all annoying, including part of a pin vise. Okay. I think we're good. Okay, what next now that Mr. Hellfane has got some primer drying on him? Didn't really work on him next. These guys are drying nicely with the Reekland Flesh Shade. Let's see how close he has to be before he comes into focus. He's not very thick, so he's not going to fill up the whole screen. So where's the sweet spot? There we go. Very nicely detailed, these crew. Very nice indeed. So what we could do, before I wrap this one up, because we're at 1 hour 40 at the moment, I could actually varnish one of these suckers. So let's pick out a nice suitable brush for that task. I may just go back to this fat one again that I was just using. I'll give it another quick rinse. And we're going to varnish this bad boy up. I'm going to avoid the nice shiny bits around the mouth with this varnish because it is matte. And if I accidentally cover them, then I can just put gloss varnish over it, or even just reapply the green ooze after the varnish. So let's give it a good shake. And why is the camera not focusing on anything now? There we go. So squeezed out some matte varnish there. I've got one more bottle of this matte varnish before I have to buy another 4-pack, because I think that's the cheapest way to get it, especially with the amount of it I use, which is a lot. You have to be careful with this stuff. Don't let it sit in an area and then start spreading it around, otherwise you will start removing paint. You got to apply it and then be done with it. If it starts pooling, just like dab it off. Don't scrape it off or brush it off. Just dab in there. When I say taking paint off, it's not going to like strip the whole model, but it will take off delicate layers, such as washes, it can take the top layer of that off quite easily. So be very careful. Sometimes that's actually a good thing, because if you've darkened a model a lot, it can bring out a lighter undershade in some spots. So occasionally I'll actually do that on purpose. Because it will kind of absorb the top, like, watery layer. If you water down a wash with actual water and then put this stuff over it, it will just eat the whole thing though and take the wash completely off. Which I found out when I was painting my Mortis engine. I'm not too worried about accidentally hitting the glossy parts because I can always fix them later. Okay, looking good, I think. On to his buddy. Also, it's going to change how the colours look briefly while it's wet as well. So don't get too carried away if it suddenly looks different, because it's just applying a see-through layer of moisture. So you want it on there, but you don't want to move it around if it's going to start breaking down any of the paint. That would be bad. That's the main takeaway from this. Some people don't even bother varnishing metal. Some people don't bother varnishing plastic or resin, but do varnish metal. I varnish everything. With metal, I do gloss varnish and then matte varnish over that. Give it extra strength. Some people just don't believe in varnishing. I'm going to need to pour some more of this varnish out here. Not much though, because we're almost done. If it starts pooling in any particular area, you don't want it to stay there, because it will dry weird and cloudy if you allow it to do that. You want it to be thin. And if you get any little cloudy bits, just poke them out quick before it dries. Okay, he's all wet right now, but when he dries, hopefully he'll be nice and matte. Steve does the same thing as me with varnishing, apparently. The matte varnish is far more likely to come out cloudy than any other, as far as I'm concerned with my experience. So if that does happen, and you've not caught it in time, you didn't get it before it dried, Even if it's partially dry, sometimes you can mitigate the damage a bit. But after it's dry, what I would typically do, if it's in a recess, which it usually is, I would just usually put some kind of wash over it, like an Agrax Earthshade or a Nuln Oil, into the bit that's gone cloudy, and just like hide it almost. But if you want to completely get rid of the cloudy part because it's in somewhere that's quite prominent and just washing over it isn't going to fix it, I've never actually done it, but apparently you can reactivate matte varnish by applying gloss varnish to it. That's what I've heard. So all is not lost. It's just annoying when something's gone wrong in the paint job. You want to fix it fast, and you have to wait hours and hours for different kinds of varnish to dry before you can fix it, and that's really frustrating. Stu doesn't varnish any of his models almost, but does look after them and doesn't put them in a carrier bag like Rem. Okay, that's good. All Rem's armies are nicknamed the Mighty Silver Elbows. The part of my metal miniature collection that got chipped the most before I started varnishing everything, probably my runesmith for my dwarf army, who used to sit on the corner of the unit with my iron breakers. And the elbow of the iron breaker would constantly nudge into his book and take the corner of the paint off, so I'd have to paint over that constantly. And that's why I started applying lots of varnish. And in that situation where two parts of a miniature might actually touch each other or rub against things, or it's part of the model I'm going to pick up, I'll actually apply 2 layers of gloss varnish before the matte varnish. So, for example, on my Goblin Spearmen, my Goblin Sharpsticks for my Kings of War Goblin army, the outermost models on the unit, the ones that I'm actually going to occasionally pick up the base by, I've put a second layer of gloss varnish on those shoulders because I know they're going to get handled, and then the matte varnish over that. Just being extra careful. And of course, how you transport your miniatures is very important. No plastic bags, no paper bags. You want a nice box with foam in it, or magnetizing them and put them in some kind of magnetic box. And even if you're using magnets, I would still like, ideally, to put foam between the models, because you never know, if you're driving in a car or on any kind of transport, there can be a bit of a bumpy ride and magnets can be knocked loose. So you do want to make sure there's that extra layer of protection as well. Bazooka is yet to varnish the last couple of minis that I painted a year or so ago. I've got some Vallejo airbrush satin varnish to use. Well, let me know how that goes, because I've had bad experiences with any kind of spraying varnish, although I haven't tried it through an airbrush. The spray varnish from Army Painter, which is the same one that I use here, but in a spray. I used that one quite a bit in the past, but I didn't like the results. Some of my models it turned cloudy, because obviously I didn't use the spray in the optimum conditions when the moon was in the 8th house of Aquarius on a Tuesday. So you got to be careful. And it has the same effect where it can eat through the top level of washes. If you're a base coat and wash kind of guy, like I am, or like I was back in, when did I start painting miniatures again? About 8 years ago. Then the spray varnish can actually eat away holes in the wash that's on the top layer. So there was Nuln Oil on armor plates, and there was just big bubbles out of it from the spray varnish, which can also happen with the brush on one, but you have more control over this, so you can be careful with it. Let's see how these guys are drying off. Make sure there's no unfortunate pooling. Looking good so far, lads. And obviously a bit of the matte varnish has got into the green ooze area, but I can just reapply that quite easily later. And same for this guy. So someone advised me last night that perhaps it would be nice if there was ooze dripping out of the noses as well. What do you think about that? Do you think just green ooze coming out of all the mouths in the army is the way to go, or do you think it should also come out of the noses? Do you think it should come out of the ears, the eyes, any other orifices that are available, or do you think it should be confined solely to the mouths? Bazooka says, when I've used aerosol spray varnishes, I've only given them a light spray like a mist coat. That's probably the trick then, giving them a thinner coat. I'd always be concerned that certain parts weren't covered though, with a spray. With a brush, you see exactly where you're applying it. With a spray, it's kind of guesswork if it's a clear coat. When you're spraying primer on something, you can actually see where the colour is. So it's easier. But I would always be concerned that I'd missed something. Steve has had the same thing with Army Painter Varnish. Sometimes great, sometimes terrible. I've still got maybe a 15 or 20-year-old spray Citadel gloss varnish. I should probably throw that away because it's very old. I don't know if that would still be good. It might explode. So once I've heard some feedback on the green ooze on those guys, then we'll wrap this one up, I think. So in about 3 hours' time, you can see some live sweet, sweet Vermintide action. And there are going to be 2 public slots open in that game as well, so if anyone watching this plays Vermintide 1 on Steam, feel free to join in. Bazooka says, just ooze from the mouths. That's the way I'm leaning with it as well. I think every single mouth in the army is going to have green ooze coming out of it. So on the Shadow Hulk, that's going to be from many, many places. So the mouth on his kneecap, the dragon's head on his hand, all the little mouths all over the place, the mouths on his back, the face on his back there, the face on his shoulder there, they're all going to have bits of ooze coming out their mouth. And I think that's going to, it's going to draw your eye to those parts of the model without them looking like they're just tacked on. They're supposed to look like they're growing out of his flesh naturally, so they're not going to be a different colour. But certain things will draw you towards them, like the ooze spilling out, and I'll probably paint the eyes as well. Okay, let's get this brush soaped off nicely, and then we can wrap this one up. So making some pretty good progress on all of these projects, and I'm very pleased with how it's coming along. My lockdown hobby time. It's getting a lot accomplished by my standards. Normally it would take me longer to finish any of these things. I'm a very slow painter. If you've ever seen me post a picture of when models have arrived, and then when you've seen the finished project, it's usually quite a long time if it's a full unit, rather than just one model. So I'll put the cover back on the wet palette now, because we're done with that for the moment. Steve says, I now brush on varnish or cheap matte varnish. I found that seems to work well, but stinks really bad, so you need to leave outside for quite a while. And Steve agrees, ooze in mouth only. Okay. I think that is going to be the way I go with it then. So I think my Night Stalkers, the main selling point of them is not going to be the ridiculously detailed paint jobs, because they are just hideous monsters really. They don't have complicated armor plates and that kind of thing, mostly. But I think I can make them nice and unique with the conversion jobs. Whether I'll convert the rank and file standard troops remains to be seen, because obviously there are a lot of them and they don't all need to look unique. But the big gribbly monsters I'm going to do some work on, definitely. If I end up buying the Mega Army box, which I probably will for the Night Stalkers, because I think combined with what I've got now, that would give me virtually everything I need for a full army there. The Mega Army box plus what I've got now. That would give me more than enough. And there is I think there's one Terror, I think it's the Terror, the big tentacle-faced monster that comes with the Mega Army box. But I've also, in the box that I traded with Mr. Steve, I've got the face and the tentacles from one of those as well. So I don't know whether to buy the, I think it's the Goliath for Dead Zone that you stick these onto to turn it into the Terror, or whether I should use these to convert my own Terror using something else. So then if I get a second one, they would both be different. Decisions. Something to ponder on, but it's not imminently important because I've got lots of other Night Stalkers floating around. Got tons of scarecrows now, which I'm looking forward to building because that was actually a fun process putting those together. I've got a lot more sprues here now. I think in total I'll have about 75 scarecrows, which will be enough for a good few units. So let's wrap this one up. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, my Facebook group and Twitter, and if you're following one of those things, then you'll see a couple of minutes before I go live on any of my videos, and also anything else I'm working on or anything that's arrived. And of course you can post in there anything that's relevant to my output, if it's for one of the armies that I'm working on perhaps, or a game system that I'm doing, or something that you think would be fun for me to cover in a video as well. Feel free to post it in the Facebook group or send it to me on Twitter. And the other links down there, of course, there are fundraising sources in there. If anyone wants to part with a portion of their life savings in exchange for helping to fund my lavish wargaming lifestyle, then feel free to go and donate down there. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, like the video if you haven't, and I'll see you in a few hours for some live Vermintide action, which will be thrilling, no doubt. Okay, I think they can both say goodnight, actually. It'll be good night for anyone that's not coming back later, and good night for now for anyone that is coming back later. So, we want them to focus. Come on, you can do it, lads. Maybe just one of them at a time. That'll do. Good night out there, whatever you are. Until later, unless you're watching Vermintide 2. Which is actually Vermintide 1. I meant 2 as in T-O-O, not the number 2.